Part 5. At the time of elementary school graduation. I had always been hungry for 6 years when I was in elementary school, but fortunately, when we went to school, they gave us a piece of cornbread. An oval, yellowish cornbread the size of a palm was a good snack. The neighboring school gave the students powdered milk. I think the cornbread and the powdered milk were food that was given to Korea from the UN, including USA. In 1966, when I was in the 6th grade in elementary school, the class started, but I could not buy the textbook. My parents didn't have enough money to buy me it. According to the school policy, 6th graders bought 2 textbooks for subjects such as national history and society in preparation for the entrance exam of middle school. We studied one book by painting it with black pencil where we should memorize it. I did not have a single textbook. After a week, the teacher said that he would take a note test the next day on the national history he had taught. In other words, it was a midterm test to improve students' ability to memorize. I came back home from school, but I couldn't prepare for the test because I didn't have any textbooks. The next morning, I borrowed a book from my neighbor just before the test. The scope of the test was about the era of the unification of 3 kingdoms. I scored higher than my neighbor on the test result. The collapse of Baekje in 660 AD, the collapse of Goguryeo in 668 AD, and the foundation of the unified Shilla in 676 AD. I looked through the history of the 3 kingdoms for a moment, but I still have vivid memories. Although I'm over 60 now, sometimes I look back at the ages of kingdoms. I felt that my brain was very unique. This good memory was helpful to my life, but it was also a poison to leave a grudge against me. I wanted to live with only good memories, but because of my good memory, I have not been able to escape from the past. It was winter in 6th grade. I applied for admission to S Middle School as my homeroom teacher told me. It was a prestigious school, and I bought an application form for admission without thinking about it. I had to write and receive an application on my own. It was a long way from the school in Yongsan, Seoul. It was about 4 kilometers away from Onhyang-dong to the school by crossing the Yeongmaru Hill in Gongdeok-dong. I failed the first exam and passed the second one to recruit new students in the evening session of the school. It was not easy to get into middle school because the school facilities were far short of accepting all the graduates. The completion rate for the second exam was 3-to-1 on average at the time. It was really good to pass middle school, but my parents didn't have the money. Yet I thought I could go to school in a vague way. On the day of the preliminary recruitment of successful candidates, my father followed me for some reason. When the teacher explained about the preparations in the school playground, most of the parents were standing with their prospective students to listen. My father, however, was standing on a stand far behind the playground by himself and looking down. He looked bitter in his shabby clothes. My parents tried to sell our house for tuition, but they didn't sell it. He couldn't afford to make the money until the registration deadline passed. The next day, after the deadline, the house was sold and my mother took me with some of the down payment and hurried to school. The chief of General Affairs section said that there was no way to do it because the enrollment was already filled. My mother went to see the vice principal. The vice principal shook his head. My mother then visited the principal's office. However, the principal escaped to the bathroom. My mother waited for him at the bathroom door. When she saw the principal come out of the bathroom, He went out to the schoolyard. My mother and I followed him as he walked around the playground a couple of times. The principal gave no answer. The cold winter weather was even colder because of the darkness. I walked around the playground with my mother like a puppy. I finished my last semester of elementary school and had a graduation ceremony. Everyone got a brilliant diploma and a graduation album. There was no one to congratulate me on my graduation. Even my parents couldn't come. It seems that my parents could not afford to celebrate my graduation because we were in a tight situation. After graduation, my mother went to see the homeroom teacher before the new semester started. She asked my teacher to teach me again in the 6th grade class. No matter how long we waited, we couldn't get in touch. At that time, there were no private institutes where elementary school graduates could go to that failed the entrance exam for middle school, so there were especially a few students who were studying again in class. My father didn't have much of a clue. Jobs were scarce at that time. My father began visiting the auto maintenance facilities with a glass knife, a plier, and a hand hammer in his bag without any skills of such. There were several car maintenance facilities in Sinchon, Seoul. There was also the last bus stop. Car windows were not just for fitting the ready-made parts as they are now, but for cutting and fitting plate glass. The curved surface glass on the front of the vehicle was made at a factory in Sinseol-dong, Seoul. At first, they made frames out of iron rod and steel plates, then melted flat glass into a curved surface. My father then cut it with a glass knife to match the window frame. The car seat was made using the following process. They fixed several spiral springs like a mattress on top of a wooden board, placed rice straw and a thin sponge on it. Then they cut and covered it with the synthetic vinyl leather to fit the seat size. My father cut the vinyl leather at home and sewed them at a bag shop on the street near the neighborhood of Rotary in Sinchon. This was because there was no sewing machine in my house. The bag shop was also located on the side of the street. The sewing machine was not for home, but for industrial use. The sewing machine's needle made a dull sound as it penetrated the vinyl leather. My father never learned how to do this from anyone, but he learned skills by overhearing others when he went to my cousin's shop in Jungno. His dexterity was excellent, and he was a fast learner. However, his glass technique was not perfect. When he changed the window in front of the bus, he would break the glass several times. Whenever he worked, I felt as if my heart would stop beating. I hoped the glass wouldn't break, but it wasn't easy to fit on the window frame, and the burned glass was easily broken. Having been unable to enroll in middle school, I had a bitter new year. Since then, my father took me to work as an assistant. Acknowledging my father's work, a bus company in Sinchon lent him a workshop at the bus service station at the back of the hospital. The bus service station was covered in black oil all over the walls and yard. Everyone used to stay up all night and fix the buses for the next day. As the work in the station increased, my father saved for an industrial sewing machine. There was a tool shopping street in Earljiro with many sewing machine stores. My father bought a used foreign product there. It turned out later that it was burnt down by a fire. It was second-hand, but I was proud that my father could have a sewing machine and do his job properly. The bus service station was so crowded that we couldn't leave the workshop. My father hired a young man from the countryside with the introduction by his neighbor. There was a condition of providing accommodation and learning skills in the workshop. However, in a few months the young man left without a word. My father's hometown friend set up a same type of seat shop and took him without any word. My father told me to stay in the vacancy where there was a young man. I ate at the workshop every day, and there was no place to wash my face or brush my teeth. There was a dormitory for the female conductor on one side of the yard, but it was not a place for a man like a mechanic to enter. My mother cooked rice every morning and carried it to me. I was only 13 years old, but I had to spend 24 hours a day in the workshop. When my father was working, I used to pick up tools or nails beside him. One day, I went to a shop at Mororene near the Susac station to buy some rice straw to fill the inside of seats. On the way to the Mororene was the railroad track that I used to go fishing. Some days, I went to the Namdaemun market with a sample of synthetic vinyl leather. In those days, all supplies were scarce, so it wasn't easy to buy a synthetic vinyl leather that fits the sample. I didn't have time to play with my friends. I didn't have time to study. I didn't even wash my face, but I worked hard to help my father without complaining. It was just the most enjoyable thing to help my father with his work. One day, I came back empty-handed from Namdaemun market without getting the necessary vinyl leather. At the bus stop, I tried to get on the bus, and the female conductor lifted her foot to block me. When she prevented me from getting on the bus, I looked at myself. I looked like a beggar. I looked down at my shorts, my arms, and legs covered in dark oil, and I was in my torn black rubber shoes. The conductor had mistaken me for being a beggar in dirty clothes. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I was focused on buying the vinyl leather for my father to work on. When I came back empty-handed, my father asked me to go to my cousin in Jungno for help. My cousin did not expect me there and wondered why I had come. I couldn't get the same vinyl leather as the sample there. It couldn't be there. Between the large bus seats my father fixed and the luxury car seats my cousin handled, there was a big difference in material and color. I brought back only the pocket money my cousin gave me. Early in the morning, when the yard of the bus service station became quiet, I often heard a sick dog crying at the general hospital across the street. The cries of the dog from the animal clinical lab were close to screams. I used to wake up when I heard that frightful cry. Across from the back of the hospital, funeral cars often passed by the bus service station. One day, there was a funeral for singer Cha Jung-rak. He was a famous singer who sang the song, "The Love That Has Gone with the Fallen Leaves." There were many stories about his death, and unfortunately, he died of meningitis at the age of 27. Thinking about the death of animals and humans, a feeling of fear penetrated my heart. When I had free time, I rode a bicycle carrying luggage in the workshop. There were some friends my age who worked in the bus service station, so we rode bikes and played together. One day, while riding a bicycle with a friend, I had an accident. I got on the back of the bike, and when it skidded and fell, my body jumped up in the air and collapsed to the ground. When I stood up, I saw both knees peeling and bleeding to the point that they had been beaten by sand. There was no place to wash, and there was no medicine to care for them. There are still dark spots on the skin of my knees. The soil has solidified in the skin. The workshop and the bus service station was the means of living for my family of 7. I was no longer a child, but an employee. At that time, I thought I should build up my strength to protect myself. In a Western movie, I saw a hero who lost his right hand and tried hard to shoot a pistol with his left hand. I thought I should build up my left hand just in case. I used to go home from the workshop on my father's errand. I was distressed at the time. When I was at the workshop, everyone was in the same boat, so it was okay. But when I went out, I could see students wearing school uniforms. They may not be aware of me, but I couldn't get past them. Everyone seemed to feel sorry for me. It's because of the difficulty of my family life. But I thought they were chosen people and I was a loser. I didn't tell my parents that I wished to go to school, and I didn't cry. I thought I was no longer a child, but an eldest son who had to help the family make a living.